Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast Magic is Real, hosted by me, Shannon. I am a psychic medium, and on this podcast, we talk about spiritually transformative experiences and all things metaphysical and spiritual. Um, I am very excited today because I have my dear friend Shaun Lether on the show, and he is a near-death experiencer with a lot of insight to share. I'm going to tell you that I purposely told him not to tell me anything about his experience in advance. So I've been waiting to hear your story, and that's because I like it to be fresh, and I want to hear it for the first time. And I think if I hear it for the first time and I can then respond in a way that's organic, then it sort of lends that feeling to the audience as well. I just want to say one quick thing too to the audience. If you are new here, I would love it if you would subscribe if you feel called. Um, if everyone could just take a little moment to support the podcast, like the video, leave a little comment, even if it's just a little heart. It means so much. It's a way to support the podcast for free. If you just take a moment to do that, I would be grateful. So thank you. Shaun Lether is joining us from Hawaiian IONS. He is in Hawaii, and IONS is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And he is the, what do you call yourself? I don't want to say leader, but the chapter organizer. What do you do for Hawaiian IONS?
Well, I mean, I created the group and lead it. So
So you are leading
basically,
it.
yeah, yeah. And I started it because, I had a couple of NDEs that brought me to Hawaii from Southern California. And then the last one was so profound. And I was in the hospital and in the ICU for a month and not expected to live. And my sisters came and visited and threw everything away in my apartment. And then I had a miracle. My lungs had collapsed and had an amazing miracle and survived. But they didn't know, how long I would, so I learned to live day by day. And I was in the hospital for another 3 months and then a rehab hospital. And I really started having all of these spiritual experiences in the ICU. But it had been prefaced a year or so before with my mom that appeared to me, which I'll tell you about in a sec. But so after the NDE, I was literally spending more time on the other side than this side. And I didn't understand what was going on. Like communicating with, several deceased loved ones. I started, I experienced angels, like living angels that could come in a body and just all these amazing experiences. And I thought I was going crazy. And so I started, I've always been into A Course in Miracles since I was like 18. And it wasn't until this last NDE that I finally got it. And so that was the first message is as soon as I could, because I was on a walker and to go through all this rehab. So as soon as I could, the message was go to A Course in Miracles group and also chant with the Hare Krishnas, which I'd never done before. And so I started going to Course in Miracles book studies and chanting with the Hare Krishnas and going to this Buddhist temple. And so I was doing all these spiritual things to try to connect and understand what had happened. And at some point, I realized these experiences that I've had, most people don't understand them. They want them, like in these spiritual groups, but they haven't necessarily had them. And so I really needed to talk to people that had had these kind of experiences because, people would say to me because I would tell them, yeah, I talked to my dead mother and all this kind of stuff. And I remember these friends from Boston that I had met that, would go to the same meditations and stuff as I did. And the wife, she's like, so you actually tell people about this stuff? And I remember in that moment, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess this is kind of weird to the average person. And so that's when I realized I need to speak with other people that have had these experiences. So I started this little sharing group and it was just like 5 people. there was only two of us that had had a near-death experience, and I still wasn't ready to talk about it. I mean, it took me, it was interesting. I told my story, I think, on the third week, and I could barely tell it without crying. And it was like, because I hadn't really verbalized it. And so anyway, COVID came, we stopped meeting in person. And that's when I started going online, and I started co-leading Ions Maui because I had Ions Oahu, and then I formed Hawaiian Ions, and we just started getting people from all over the world. And so it really started with the sharing group.
That's wonderful. And I want to ask you, did you not want to talk about it yet because you hadn't fully processed it, or because it was so sacred that you didn't want people sort of
Both,
shitting on it?
but
Or,
definitely the
yeah,
sacred, because as you know, it's been how many years since we've known each other,
yeah,
and it took me a while to feel like, yeah, that I was ready to share this publicly, because I'd already had, like, some fundamentalists say, like, oh, that's a demon you're talking to. And it's like, no, that's my mother. Your mother. Like, that's one
yes.
thing we all, if we lived with our mother for a period of time, your own mother, even from the other side. And so that's kind of what made me not want to share it for a while. And then I started getting clear messages. Well, number one, I started understanding it more, because at first I just didn't even understand. And
Yeah.
I also was one of those, you've heard about the reluctant messenger.
Mhm.
I was the bit like, I'm like, me, this happened to me. Like, I just, it should not have happened to me, is how I was feeling. And it's like, why me? And what's kind of interesting is I've, with the mediumship and stuff, I've had people actually say, yeah, why him? Not me. People that I'm related to and stuff. And they're like, why is he connecting with the other side? And literally, I was just blasted open.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you, so it started with, so my mom passed away in 2015. And I'd already had an NDE that brought me to Hawaii and made me have to stay in Hawaii, which was in 2004. And I had a hernia strangulate, and I went 4 days without not knowing what was going on. So I had an emergency surgery, and they had to leave me open, my stomach open, and they said you can't fly or go anywhere for 6 months. So that pretty much made it. I'm like, okay, if I gotta stay in Hawaii, then I want to stay recover by a waterfall. And sure enough, I found this property, private waterfall and river and three houses. So stayed in Hawaii. And then I started having all these spiritually transformative experiences that I didn't even understand what was happening. And they were real and mystical. And but also I started losing everything financially, because like I'd made all this money in real estate and stuff in California, and ended up investing it in Hawaii, and we had the economics, everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I didn't understand like what's going on at the time. I didn't even know what a dark night of the soul was, but I had a huge one. And I started, and it wasn't until literally recently that I even understood why all that happened. And so it was like the layers of the onion being peeled. So I was losing everything that mattered to me in this world. And then in 2015, my mom died. And I moved over here to Oahu from the Big Island, and I was struggling. Nothing was working still. Like everything was like hard. Whereas in the past, everything flowed. And and so then my mom died, and I'm like, I can't go to Utah now. I can't afford it. I'm like, just I just didn't want to go. And so she came to me, and it was wild, because at first I was, it's them, but that ego in us, that small, like, doesn't want to believe it. But she said, you don't need to go. she said, and then she showed me, she said, go here, this is where I'll be. And my mom loved plants. She was a florist, and I was a landscape contractor in California. And I had this amazing botanical garden in Hawaii. So we both love plants. So she showed me this garden, and she showed me her sitting on a log, except there was these tall, like pine trees. And I thought, wow, like we don't really have pine trees in Hawaii. And like that, because they look like mountain pines. Yeah. So anyway, about 6 months to 8 months later, one of my sisters was here, and we were going to go hiking. And so let me back up. So my mom started coming to me more after that. And she'd had mental health issues because she had an NDE in 1975. And that's the year that like Raymond Moody defined the term near-death experience. And so, of course, most people didn't know what it was, or that they were real. And in Utah, they didn't. And she was hospitalized in several mental institutions. And, it wasn't just the NDE, but that was part of it, because she always wanted to go home. And she did not want to be here. And so, anyway, she had a lot of troubles when I was growing up. And that was one of the first things that she started telling me. And she started showing me her whole life, why she was the way she was. And what was amazing is growing up, because of her mental illness and stuff, she would get like possessed and check out. And it's almost like somebody else took over her. And she tried to kill me several times. And so she chased me around the house with a knife and tried to kill me, which caused, of course, all kinds of trauma. And then she'd switch and almost not remember what she did. She wouldn't even apologize, because so that caused a lot of trauma, of course. But after she died, and she starts showing me her life and how it was for her when she was raised, and I got to see her whole life and why she was the way she was. And once I saw all that and I had the full picture, it was like complete forgiveness, but there's nothing to forgive, because now I see why she was the way she was. And so even though it was horrible, and it caused a lot of trauma, which still affects me, I understood. And what's very interesting is she knows that trauma, and she's still trying to make up for it. And that was partly what she said when I kept saying, why are you here? She said, to be the mother I couldn't be when I was alive. And so she started being with me daily, started showing me these things. But she was the only one that really came to. And then about 6 months later, I had my sister here. And we decided to go for a hike in a place that neither one of us had ever been. And so as we started going towards that place, I started getting like vertigo. And it was so weird, because it was like I was getting dizzy. And I'm from Utah, and then I had a house in Big Bear Lake, so in the mountains, and so I don't get, elevation sickness. And this hill was only like 4,000 feet. But the higher we went towards this park we were going to go to, the more vertigo I got. And so then we get to this park, get out, and I've got so much vertigo, I couldn't even stand up. I get out of the car, I do like a face plant, and then we go and sit on a picnic table, and I'm kind of recovering, and then we decide to go for a walk. Well, there's these giant pines, but what they are is they're Cook Island pines, which are tropical pines. But I didn't put two and two together right then. And so as we're walking through this trailway, through this forest, all of a sudden, my sister is ahead of me, she's on the right-hand side, and I'm behind on the left-hand side. And I look over, and there's my mom sitting on the log that she showed me when she said, this is where I'll be. And it blew my mind. I literally, I started crying. And I told my sister, I'm like, she's here. Because this sister, I think she was the only one that I told really what was going on. with my mom visiting. And so, of course, she couldn't see her. And then so we were trying to take pictures and stuff to see if like she'd show us an orb or something. But from then on, it was even more so that she was with me, but she never said why she was truly here, which it was to help get me through my NDE. And so for some reason, I think there's certain things we're not supposed to know. Like I just kind of have that knowing. So there's certain things I don't even ask. But back then, I just kept asking, why are you here? And she just kept saying to me, the mother, that she couldn't be, which was a lie. So, anyway, so I started having those experiences with her. And then I started having experiences with other people. There was this fire in this hotel, apartment, and it was about a mile from. And several people died, and it was on a Friday. And Saturday night, I was like sitting there, like laying on the bed. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't meditating. I was just in that between zone. And all of a sudden, this blonde guy wearing an aloha shirt in spirit comes into my apartment, and what looked like his mother, and it looked like she was in a wheelchair. She was like lower. I didn't really see the wheelchair, but I could tell she was disabled. And it dawned on me, these people are confused, like they don't know where they are. And it took me probably about 5 minutes to realize these people had died in a fire, and they were confused. And I'm just like new to all this, right? I'm only talking to my dead mother, not all these other people. And so it was interesting because I didn't know what to say. I didn't like, I never studied mediumship or anything. I never, and so I didn't even know to say, go to the light or anything like that. So I just said, I can't help you. But I'm sure there's somebody around here that can. I kind of felt like, when tourists come up to you, like in Waikiki and they ask for directions or something. That's what it felt like. And so that was a Saturday night. And then Tuesday, they identified the people that had died in the newspaper. And sure enough, this blonde guy with a blue aloha shirt worked for Aloha Airlines, and his disabled mother, she was in a wheelchair and they couldn't get out because they were way high up. And so they went under the bed and they died of smoke inhalation. And so, so then I just started having more and more experiences like that. And then I had this profound NDE starting in 2017, where I just started getting really sick. And I'd always had lung issues and asthma and allergies, would get bronchitis. And in fact, I'd had an NDE when I was 6 months old, but I didn't know that at the time. But I had this connection with the other side that I knew was not normal at an early age. And, and that's one thing about growing up in trauma and dysfunctional families. As you know, we stop trusting ourselves. And so I had this connection at an early age, but then because of stuff that was going on with my mom and my dad, and I literally stopped trusting that guidance that we all have, and that I have this deep connection to. And honestly, that is probably one of the things that I am the most grateful to for with these experiences, is that understanding that we all have a connection to the other side. It's just listening and trusting, which is what I stopped doing, was trusting myself. Or not trusting myself, trusting the messages and second guessing them. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that NDE.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so like I said, I started getting really sick, and I used to live in Santa Barbara, and I did all this naturopathic stuff and didn't take antibiotics and got into all kinds of herbs and really cool stuff. And so when I got sick here, I just like knew it's like, okay, take these Chinese lung herbs, all this different stuff. And, but it wasn't working. And it was like, nothing was working. And, this was just a couple of years before COVID took over. And so I started getting sicker and sicker, but thinking these herbs were working. And after about 2 months, my oxygen had completely dropped to, I couldn't walk. So I finally went to the doctor. They knew immediately, like, there's something wrong, he's dying. So they called an ambulance, and then I went to the hospital and the emergency room. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. And I was a complete mess because I'd been sick for now like 2, 3 months and just getting worse and worse and worse. And I didn't go to the doctor until I couldn't breathe, I couldn't walk. I was awful. So they decided to put me in the ICU. And as they were waiting for a bed in the ICU, they moved me to this other room. And this nurse was cleaning me up because, like I said, I was a mess. And all of a sudden, so I'm in this hospital in towards downtown Honolulu that looks out over, downtown and other buildings and stuff. And all of a sudden, what was downtown is now like the Spanish countryside. I've never been to Spain, but I knew that it was Spain. And it was about 400 or 500 years ago. And all of a sudden, and the nurse is now wearing habits, and she then thanks me. She said, I want to thank you for helping me fulfill my purpose of helping people when they cross over to the other sides. And my first reaction was, I'm not dying. Like, literally, that was. And then my next reaction was, wait, why are you thanking me? I should be thanking you, like, for sitting here taking care of me. And so I started that experience, and I'll tell you more about about that a little bit later. And just remind me because it's pretty cool.
Okay.
And so anyway, so I started going downhill fast. They put me in the ICU, and they wanted to intubate me, and they're like, we don't know what we can do. Like, and that was the other thing, is to see, this was the head of the lung clinic, and to see the look of horror in his face, like mirroring back to me what was going on. I will never forget that, because he's like, we don't know what to do about it. Like, because they just saw, like, I was dying. So they called my sisters, to come from, one was in Utah and one was in LA, to come and say their goodbyes. And so one sister, came the next day, and the other one was a couple of days later. But by then I was completely strapped down in the ICU with all these tubes in me. And I would just be in and out of my body the whole time. And one of the main times I was outside of my body, and I was with my mom and God. And God wasn't a man or a woman. It was like just this bright light and this love that you've never felt, that I've never felt in this world. And what was really amazing is I was one with them, but also separate. And so I looked down at my body, and I remember thinking, you poor thing, what have you been thinking about yourself and the world? And that was the first time for me, even though I'd had, like, this other NDE that brought me to Hawaii, this one was the first time that I completely exited the story, and and saw that I was not who I thought I was. Nothing was how I thought it was. And that was also the first time that I had compassion for myself, because I looked at myself like you would, like, like when you have a dog and like they've hurt themselves and they keep licking the wound, so you put the collar on them, and you're like, stop doing that. You don't realize you're hurting yourself. That's what it felt like to me when I was looking down at my body, not realizing how my thoughts were hurting. And so so I kept having episodes like that, and I knew that I was dying, but I didn't want to die because I knew I had so many more things that I wanted to do that I hadn't done. And so I went through this period of a couple of weeks while I was in there in the ICU, not knowing if I was going to get to stay, live, or not. And so at some point, um, they I had to sign all those papers that, like they're not going to keep you on life support. Like if you're not going to get off and you can't have a meaningful life, then they will end the ventilator. So I signed all those papers and not fully realizing what that meant, but so at some point they were getting ready to take me off the ventilator. And it was like, you can't, the longer you stay on it, the more likely you're never going to get off of it. So they're like, okay, we're going to try. And if it doesn't work, we'll try a tracheotomy. If otherwise it doesn't work. And so I heard this song playing, and this was the first time this ever happened. There was this song playing in the background, and it was Daniel Goki, Tell Your Heart to Beat Again. And this song basically goes, yesterday's a closing door. You don't live there anymore. Tell your heart to beat again. It's all about rebirth, basically. And I heard that song. And then within the next day or so, they decide they're going to take the tube out. And something else that was kind of interesting is, so my sisters, can't really handle seeing their brother dying, right? So my one sister would go to the coffee carts and call her husband and her kids and stuff. And so I would just leave my body and go hang out with her. Like, I didn't want to be alone there in the ICU. And then the other sister would go and get egg salad in the lunchroom or the cafeteria. And so I'd go hang out with her because it was awful being there alone. So it was really cool to just be in and out of my body. And like when they were drilling me for bone marrow, trying to figure out, if I had some kind of cancer, I would just like leave and go float over the ocean in Waikiki. And I'd tell my sisters, I'm like, I'm checking out. I'll see you in a while. And so anyway, so when they decided they're going to pull the tube out and see what happens, I had a nephew who had died in 2008. On top of everything that was going on then, my closest nephew, well, my first nephew, he had cystic fibrosis, and we were very, very close when he was alive. And he died, actually, 2007. And so in the hospital, as they're getting ready to take this tube out, he'd already been there to visit me. But all of a sudden, he appears at the end of the bed, the foot of the bed, and he's up. And as they're getting ready to take the tube out, he's showing me, all of a sudden he shows me, Foghorn Leghorn, that cartoon, the big rooster. He shows me that. And he's showing me that to show me to pump up my chest to breathe, because he's trying to show me how to breathe. And so as they're getting ready, he puffs up his chest, shows me that rooster, showing me to do that. Of course, I'm like laying there strapped down with all these things. So I'm not really doing it, but I'm trying. And as the tube's coming out, he puffs his chest up, tube's coming out. And all of a sudden, as the tube comes out, he breathes into me from the other side. And it was like, I could breathe. And it blew my mind because I hadn't been able to breathe for months. But then, of course, for several weeks, I was on the tube. And my oxygen saturation didn't last, but at least I could breathe. So I had to be on oxygen for another, I think, like 2 or 3 months, the mask, until my body could hold the oxygen. But that was one of the most memorable things. And that's the kind of thing that it took me a couple of years that I could even tell that part without crying. And so for the next couple of months, I was in the hospital and had all of these like human angels. People would come and give me blessings. And this one guy, I remember, so I had to learn how to do everything again. Like literally to breathe, to eat, to sit up, to walk. So I had two choices. I was either going to go to a care home for like invalids, or if I could walk, then I'd get to go to rehab. So I worked so hard to walk, and it was like physical therapy. And it's like, just to sit up took a day or so. And then to like turn around and put my legs took another day or so. And then to like stand up. And it took about a week or two before I could even walk outside of my room. And so there was this really cool experience for me where my first time walking outside of the room, and it'd been like a couple of weeks, and I had like a physical therapist and a nurse and my oxygen and all that stuff. And I was on a walker, and they're on each side. And I'm walking, and all of a sudden I completely left my body, and I'm behind myself, looking down at myself walking with this walker and the PT and the nurse. And it was so wild because it's like, who's controlling that body? And so I was having these kind of experiences, is just in and out, even though I now realized I was going to live, but I had no guarantee that I was going to live beyond that day. And I went that way for almost 2 years because my lungs had completely collapsed. The doctors are like, we don't know. We haven't seen, in fact, they hadn't seen lungs as bad as mine since like 1986 or something in medical school, the head of the lung clinic. So it was just a day by day thing. But I kept hearing that song. Yesterday's a closing door. You don't live there anymore. Tell your heart to beat again. So I was hoping to go to this rehab place. And because I could walk, they're like, okay, we're gonna try to get you in the rehab place. So there was wait. So this janitor who had been giving me blessings, who I still don't know if he was a real janitor or not, or if this was an angel in a body, because he came and he gave me this other blessing, and he said, a hospital bed's going to open for you by this afternoon. And sure enough, I think that was like 11 when he did this, 2 o'clock, a bed opened up at this rehab. So they, got me all ready, and a medical transport. And so I went in, it was basically an ambulance. And I'm in the ambulance, and we're pulling out of the driveway, heading to the rehab. And guess what starts playing on the radio? That song, Yesterday's a Closing Door. You don't live there anymore. Tell your heart to beat again. And I texted my sisters, and I'm like, it's that song again. Like, we're headed to the rehab and it's playing. And so I was in the rehab for a couple of weeks, and then I finally got to go home. I hadn't been home for 3 months, over 3 months. And I got to spend the weekend at home. And then Monday, I had to go back to the hospital for like PT and see the doctor and stuff. Well, as I'm coming down from my apartment into the lobby, the medical transport's out, in front, and the door's open. And what song do I hear? That song, Yesterday's a Closing Door. You don't live there anymore. Tell your heart to beat again. And it just blew my mind. And so that was the start of one of the biggest ways that my mom on the other side was communicating with me, is through music. And they would use other people too, but music was one of the biggest ways. So songs. And it's weird because like we all hear music all the time. And you're, in the background and stuff. But there's something about when they're sending songs from the other side, like, listen to this. Like there's a message here.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically for the next 2 years, I was literally living with my mom and my nephew, and I started calling them the gang because I had all these, and I was spending more time on the other side. And like I said, people that I'd meet, they're like, because I was just like, one thing about NDEs that I think is like you have this like childlike quality, and that's how I was. I didn't care. The old me, I was afraid of what people thought about me, but like those old false beliefs, I didn't have. So I had no problem telling people about my dead mother and my nephew, and so yeah, that's why I started sharing her. Is
Oh,
literally
that's awesome.
I had to talk with other people that had these experiences.
Yeah, I mean, how it's become your whole sort of your whole reality at that point, where once you get turned on to it, it's like you got to process it. You got to, that's why it's so wonderful to have this group, but not just your group, IONS in general, and the conference that we both went to. But it is so important because once you get turned on to the reality that this is, I don't know, for lack of a better term, a simulation, which I'd love to talk with you about, and see if that resonates with you, because I got a tattoo on my arm that says life is but a dream, because I realized that while this is very important, this experience, our connections are important. This life is so important. Everything that happens is, but it's also what I believe is kind of a simulation for us to work out. It's an Earth School simulation where we choose these roles with other souls to act out things to help us grow. But I would love to hear your idea about what is this a simulation? I know that depends on your definition, but is it a simulation? If so, kind of what is it all about?
Well, um, I so it's definitely a projection of our thoughts, I believe. And so which I guess is kind of the same as a
Yeah.
simulation. Um, and like I said, when I left my body, I got to see that. Like, so once I did that, I saw, yeah, this is all um a dream, for lack of a better word, or simulation.
Hmm.
And in Hinduism, in Sanskrit, they call it Leela, which is the divine play. And that's really what it is. And so, along with all the trauma and dysfunction and growing up with narcissists, I didn't know what gaslighting meant
Hmm.
until a few years ago. But what I realized when I left my body, I didn't know the word for it, but I'd been mostly gaslit my whole life. So I was just like living this unconscious life and and playing the roles that other people projected onto me.
Hmm.
And I didn't know that till the NDE. So yeah, it's like, and that's one of the hardest things is, they say it can take 7 years or more on average to integrate. Well, I haven't fully integrated and I don't think I ever will. And I actually don't want to. Like, because, once you know it's not real, um, even though it seems real, seems very real sometimes.
Hmm.
It's like, no, I never want to go back to that because that was, to believe that this is all real and this is all there is, to me was miserable. And what is cool is like life is so magical now. when you know that there is something beyond this, and you know how beautiful it is, but also when you realize that our loved ones, they're here. It's just like a different dimension. And so in the hospital, this is what was really weird, is in the ICU, I could like, it was like, it felt like I could turn my head to the left and be with my mom and God, and
Mm.
turn my head back and I'm in this dimension. And so I kind of, even though I don't live like I did those first 2 years, I am in constant connection with the other side. And I have to tell you, it's, it is, it makes life magical. And it also, like, I had all this money and I had all this, I had 4 degrees and graduate honors. And I had this like superficial life that seemed to the outside world amazing. And yet I wasn't happy. And what was interesting is every year at my birthday, I'm like, am I going to be happy this year? And, I wasn't miserable, but I really wasn't happy. And in 2003, when I had all this stuff, I had Hummer and I had this house in Big Bear, and it snowed because I love snow at Christmas, and my family was coming, and I just put in satellite radio, and so I put on that song "Believe" with Cher, and I'm driving around the lake, and it's just beautiful, and that's when I really realized I'm not happy. I have everything that the world says you could want. And so what's funny is a couple of years ago, I was sitting, I lost all that stuff, but actually I prefer to say and believe I gave it all up. I gave up everything of this world to gain everything of the real world. And so a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was sitting in my apartment and I listened to that song, Believe. And it was so interesting because it's like, wow, I don't have all that stuff anymore. And I'm happy. I'm so happy. And, I was just in LA for the holidays, my birthday, and I hadn't been there for like 5 years. And I kept, telling my sister that. And it was like, wow, I have to say for anybody that's committed, considering suicide or anything, that was one of the thoughts that I kept thinking. It's like, I am so glad I stuck around to know
Yeah.
the truth. Because I think that's one of the worst things is when people think they're all alone in this world. And that's something that I've discovered is we're never alone. We may think we are, but we we have so many helpers and our loved ones, but angels and guides, and they're always around us. It's just our false beliefs that lead us to believe that they're not. And to me, I think that's almost one of the most important messages of the NDE and so forth is that you're never alone.
Yeah. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So we have our loved ones on the other side, and then we have spirit guides and ascended masters and all kinds of. I always pray when I pray. I just say, God, Jesus, ascended masters, loved ones in spirit, spirit guides, angels, archangels, because I don't even know if that covers it, but I just feel like that kind of covers it for me, and kind of whoever's there. So I would love to hear what you know or what you understand or what your beliefs are about like angels versus spirit guides. And a lot of people will say, well, if I've got these protectors, then why do bad things still happen? And well, they didn't protect me from this, and they didn't, that happened, and that was really terrible. So clearly, I wasn't protected. So that's kind of where I was going with it. Is what do you say about that?
That's actually, I'm so glad you asked that actually, because so first of all, remember I said I call them the gang?
Yeah.
Yes. That's an easy way to say, like, because yeah, there's guides, there's angels, there's, my mother, my nephew, now my a niece of mine that crossed over, they are all around. So I just call them the gang. And I don't differentiate a whole lot because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
you know. And my best friend died last year, and I had a shared death experience with him. And so what was really cool is number one, he was literally my best friend in a bar, and here in Hawaii, and and he reminded me that really, even with all this connection to the other side, we really don't know what's going to happen. We can have ideas, we can have these timelines, but for him to die, it was a freak thing. He was going to live for a long time. And so, you know, he's now probably one of my, well, he is one of my gang now. And so I just call them the gang. Every once in a while, I'll differentiate and I'll say spirits. But so the what was the question?
The
Say
thing
it
about
again.
how people will say, like, well, I wasn't protected because I got in this car accident or lost a loved
Yes.
one or whatever.
Yeah. Thank you. Because that, you know, so all of the trauma and stuff that I've been through and narcissist in my life, I didn't understand this then. But now I understand that I chose them and they're playing a role. And so if you've seen that Eat, Pray, Love,
Mm-hmm.
if you remember, you know, she talks about the soulmate in there and how, you know, people think the soulmate is the love of your life that you're going to be with forever. But that's not necessarily true. The soulmate is the one that shines a mirror in your face and shows you where, you know, you maybe are off your path of, because I believe we come here, we want to learn certain things. And if I want to learn what love is in this body, in this experience, what is the best way for me to learn love is by it, yeah.
Yeah.
And so how can I learn a lack of love without, you know, these people that I loved who couldn't love me back? And so at the time, it seems like abuse, and it is, you know, in this realm, like it's abuse. But those people actually helped me learn love and how to love myself because they couldn't. So it's funny because that's as you know, that's a tricky question because a lot of people don't understand it. But I fully believe that the people that are here, anything that triggers us is an opportunity for healing. And so these people that do bad things, quote unquote bad things, I believe they're here to teach a lesson. And we all participate in one way or another. So that goes to the simulation or the dream. And you know, Hitler's a good, you know, example. Like, you know, and a lot of people they're like, well, he did all these awful things, but I feel like that Hitler was a reflection of the consciousness at the time. Hitler couldn't have, you know, gained the, you know, the popularity and be a leader if his beliefs weren't already reflected in the consciousness of the people at the time. And so I believe that he was a teacher because, you know, a lot of people say you don't have to have pain, but that's not been my experience. I have grown through pain. I've grown through trauma. And most of the people in my sharing groups, the same thing. Like, I don't know many people at all that are being honest that have had a spiritual awakening without some sort of trauma or pain. And so I really look at these people as being teachers now. So, like my dad or my ex, I look at them as they played these roles for me to help me expand and grow and wake up and learn love and learn to love myself. And if they hadn't have played that role, I wouldn't have been able to learn this. And so it's funny because sometimes I joke, it's like, okay, I got the message. Now you can stop playing that role. But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I relate with that too. It's like, I think we've learned the lesson here, but we just keep doing it again because we're like, well, maybe there's more in there. That's really, yeah, I agree with you. I think that it doesn't mean that bad things won't happen. The fact that you're guided, it's just that you're, and also the concept of on the other side, there's no measure of good or bad. There are just things that happen. And no one, we can't relate to that here. So it's very difficult for people to buy that. Because on the other side, it's all good. It's all good. You're not ever really going to die. You're not. There is no death. Therefore, the worst thing that can happen is that you die, and that's actually not the worst thing that can happen. So I've heard it said from other near-death experiencers that it's like people say, "Well, why would I choose this?" And it's because your soul on the other side, from that perspective, is only coming down here for a second. It's just a little visit. It'll take a minute, and you'll be right back. But for us, it drags out the span of a lifetime. So we're like, why am I tortured and tortured and tortured? But once you go back over, it feels like, and I'd love to hear if you had a sense of time when you were visiting the other dimensions or experiencing the other dimension, did it feel that way to you that there's time is not a thing? It's not relevant to anything that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, what you're saying, yeah, all things are neutral.
Right.
They're not good or bad. It's what we choose to think of them. And so that's one of the things that I really saw. And um, because I really had this life of abuse and all these awful things. And I have to tell you, I remember, you know, taking responsibility that we created this, that's really hard. I think most people can't do it
Mm-hmm.
because I remember what that felt like. I literally, and this was after my end, because I saw all these things, right? But there's stuff that we can only heal in a body, it seems,
Yeah.
while we're here. And so even though we're perfect on the other side, and yes, there's no time on the other side, for here, like the Course in Miracles says, time is a learning device or something here. And um, I, so, it was really hard. I just remember to take responsibility that I'd created all these amazing things. And then I created losing all these things and then going and dying and having, all these health issues. And it was really hard to take responsibility. I created this. And I literally do remember that moment. And because I was sitting there, I was so nauseous. And I was listening to, Paul Selig, the channel,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who he was. And then when I was doing these spiritual book studies, I was introduced to him. And it was interesting because my gang was saying what his guides are saying. And I think it was when I was listening to him or reading one of his books when I saw in that moment, yeah, I created all this. And so I have true compassion for anybody that can't
Yeah.
believe that they did this. Like when somebody says, look, what I created being raped or,
Right.
drugged and, I know people that have had those experiences and been able to later say, oh yeah, this was for my highest and best good. And so that's where I am now, which again, I have compassion for people that can't see it, but that's why I'm so glad I didn't commit suicide. And then I hung on because it's like, now I understand. Now I understand why I had to lose all that stuff. Now I understand why I had to be with narcissists and people with antisocial personality disorder, and I created this amazing life for myself in this world, but then it all had to be destroyed. And it all had to be destroyed because it doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because that triggers some people when I've said that.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand, because if you place all of your value in this world, it's easy to think it's real. And so there's an example of why I had to lose it, because it was all real to me. And it was like my idols and all these things, the Hummer, the Range Rover, all these houses. It was real. To me, it also validated me and made me feel. The funny thing is it didn't, but it felt like it made me feel worthwhile.
Yeah.
And so I had to create all that, and then I had to lose it. And A Course in Miracles talks about the undoing, and other spiritual paths talk about it too. And so for me, I had to have this undoing of everything that I thought meant something. I had to lose it, but I didn't understand that at the time. And now I do. So now I'm absolutely grateful. And Ram Dass, before my last NDE, I'd heard of him, but I didn't really know who he was. And he also lived here in Hawaii. And so after my NDE, I really started listening to his talks a lot. And they were so helpful. And what was interesting is, he has this, there's a documentary about him, and he talks about becoming nobody. And
I watched that documentary.
Yeah. And so after my NDE, I spent this 2 years, like in the lights, and just love and no real fears or problem. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Because the life you thought that you had made for yourself is gone. I had all this real estate and stuff, and I'm like, it's going to support me, and that's all gone. And I had to come to terms also with, I had like some brain damage, right? Going without oxygen. I mean, I couldn't string together a sentence afterwards. Like, sometimes I still feel like it can. But that was another big thing, is I had to accept. And I think that's the other thing that's hard, is that acceptance and surrendering, which is a blessing from the NDE and the ICU. I was forced to surrender and to accept. And so anyway, about that 2 years, it was like, I was in this light, and then all of a sudden it's like, I went into fear, because it's like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be like a ward of the state, like, a disabled? This is not the life that I planned. And so it was weird, because it was like, on one hand, I'm walking with all these spirit guides and my gang. And then on the other hand, this life, which I still had not completely given up, meaning this reality. And so I went into fear a little bit. And I remember all of a sudden, I was having a little dark night of the soul. And that's when I saw the saying from Ram Dass about becoming nobody. And what it basically says, what he said, is you spend all your life becoming somebody, which is what I did. Create all this education, all this stuff that I thought was me. And then with awakening, you realize none of that means anything. It's not true. But you have like this emptiness that the spirit hasn't completely filled up, if that makes sense. And so, like he says, and then with realizing that none of that means anything, and on the path to becoming nobody, it's like, well, who am I if I'm not all these different things? And of course, on the other side, when you're there with God and you see how perfect you are, and the love, um, that on that side, that's wonderful, right? And like connecting with my mom and stuff here on this side, and the love from her, that's wonderful. But still, because we're in this realm, we're here for a reason. And so it's like, so yeah, who am I if I'm not all those things? And that was huge for me. And so here's what was really cool though, is I had to, all these things that I valued of the material world, I had to lose them to realize they were valueless. And so, you've heard about the life review. And so what's been really cool is I feel like I've been rewriting my life review because all this other stuff that I'd done didn't matter. And now I get to see what matters. And it's the love. It's those small gestures of kindness. Just, like in my sharing groups, like people will come to the group, and you've been there, and they'll come and they're like, I thought I was the only person in the world. I thought I was going crazy. I had somebody just at the group last week that his whole family, his dead grandmother's coming to him. His parents think he's crazy. His doctor thinks he's crazy. And it was so wonderful because I'm like, you're in the right place. My dead mother came to me, and I know how you feel. And that matters because we can take that stuff with us, giving somebody a little bit of hope or letting them know you're not crazy, you're okay, giving them a little bit of love, connection. That is what really matters. And so that's what I really, it makes life really magical and worthwhile to know that's what matters. That the only, the love that we've shared, the people's life that we made better in even a small way, that's what matters. And we can take that with us. And that's what fulfills me now, because, it used to be this outside validation, right? Like, the Range Rover, how does that feel? Well, I don't even have a car now, and I don't need a car. I mean, the validation is literally when somebody says, you said something that, that validated me, that gave me a reason to keep going. That's really what makes it worthwhile. And so the other thing along with that I think is really cool is I truly believe that if we're in service, that we are supported from the other side. And that has been because, like I said, I lost, all my real estate, everything went away. And it's like that fear of like, what am I going to do? And just listening to, this is the other thing. I knew that I had a purpose, but what was weird is I didn't know what it was. And I also thought, is this ego? Like, is that ego to think that you have this purpose? And it was actually in a Paul Selig book. I don't remember which one, but one of them actually talked about that, and about purpose. And I remember that how much that validated. So it's like, okay, I have this purpose, but I don't know what it is. I knew that I was supposed to share my story. I'd met this angel in a human body that could read my mind. It was wild. I was in a support group. I used to go to all these different support groups for people with terminal illnesses and stuff here. And I literally did. I met living angels that like shouldn't be here. They don't have anything. Some of them are even houseless. And I will tell you that many of those people are much more awake than anybody realizes, because many of them don't need all these things that we think we need. So anyway, I was in a support group, and this guy comes, he didn't live here, never seen him before. And I'd already knew that I had this purpose, I had this calling, but I didn't know what it was. And the small me, the reluctant messenger, like was like still, which I still have issues with, playing small. And so this guy, he starts talking to this group. There's like 14 of us. And all of a sudden I feel him like reading my minds. And so I said to him through my mind, I said, "Are you reading me?" He's talking to the group, nods his head. And he's like, "Yes."
Wow.
Yeah. So I just was blown away. And I'm like, I need to know this guy and why is he here? Because I'd already had all these experiences, but they weren't in that kind of a setting where publicly some guy's communicating with me while he's talking to this group. And so after that group, we went and he said, "I just want you to know, I know how hard you've been praying. And I want you to know your prayers are being listened to. They're being heard." And this guy proceeds to tell me stuff that only me and God know. And so this is where, you know, I I was like, okay, so I've experienced angels, I've experienced, but this guy's beyond an angel. Like, this is like, so what's below God, and what's between God and an angel? So archangel, Jesus, ascended master. I still don't know, and I didn't ask. All I know is that this guy knew stuff that only me and God knows. He told me I had to tell my story. He told me I will be leading groups. He actually said in that group, he's like, "Shaun's gonna be leading this group." And I just like shrunk because I'm like, it was weird because I had this knowing, but it was no, like literally a reluctant messenger. Like, and and that's also why one of the messages I got, when I was thinking about doing these groups and stuff, is there's that saying, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And that was the message I got. Like, all of these people that have been through all this trauma and abuse, that saying applies to them, because it seems like some of the people that have had the most unmistakable trauma are the ones that have these NDEs or these spiritual awakenings, and God and so forth speaks through them. And so yes, he was telling me all this stuff. And then what was amazing is he knew stuff in my personal life that I've not told anyone, and was telling me about that and what to do. And that's when I knew it's like, okay, he's way beyond just an angel. I mean, of course, there's no such thing as just an angel, but
Yeah.
this guy was. And so, yeah, so that led me to, even though it took me a while, but it was like just following the breadcrumbs. And it's like, okay, I just need to talk to other people having these experiences. Like, I never set out to have this big group or anything. And I will tell you, it has become, it maybe took a year or so. And I'm like, this is my purpose. I was led to my purpose only because I was following the breadcrumbs, doing this, then this, then this. It wasn't like some big grand
Mhm.
thing. And so I can really say we do have a purpose. Everyone's different, and some, and I think what I've shared is like, your purpose is to be in the present moment and listen, what should you do now? And so, like, for me, it was like, follow the breadcrumbs, do this now, and then be conscious of whatever the next thing is, uh, you know, prompt, whatever you're guided to. And the funny thing is a lot of times those prompts don't make sense.
Yeah.
And also they're scary. Like, for me, like doing like Zoom and leading these groups when I felt like I don't even know what I'm doing.
Yep. Yeah, I relate so much and I appreciate that. I think that's such a beautiful thing that you shared. And I think sometimes it is that tower moment where everything falls apart so better things can come together. For me, it was losing my voice as a voice actor, where I was finally starting to succeed and then I lost my voice and I couldn't work anymore. And then the pandemic hit. And that was when I had my tower moment. where everything burned to the ground. And I was going, why is this happening to me? I worked my whole life to be an actor, and I'm finally just starting to really be an actor and make a living at it. And then I lost it. And I asked the question. Well, I found out later it was because that led me to a spiritual awakening. That led me to discovering that I could, quote unquote, talk to dead people. They're not really dead, but, and spirit communication started to come to me. And I found out that, oh, there's a whole spiritual purpose that I have. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily mediumship per se, although I do mediumship readings and bring messages to people. It's what we're doing right now, this podcast, what you're doing with that with the group, uh, sharing a message that this is not all there is, that there is so much hope, even when things seem just absolutely dire and depressing and discouraging, that this isn't the end. So if it's not okay, it's not the end. And yes, there are painful things that happen. And as we said, not to minimize any of it, it's so painful. And we can honor that, but also know that this is a sort of a stepping stone on the way to our soul's evolution. And now, as soon as I finally sunk into my spiritual purpose, then I got my voice back. And now I'm a voice actor, and I don't even want to put a title on what I do, but just a spiritual person, like in touch with my soul and my spirituality in a way that I can connect better with other people and be of service to people better, because I've really focused on my own healing so that I have space to hold for other people and compassion to hold for other people, and to do things like the podcast and let people know that magic is real. There is magic in this world, even though sometimes it seems like, what are we doing here? This is such a shit show. But then you start to realize that there are souls and spirits guiding you, talking to you, giving you messages that are verifiable, and then your mind is just blown. And that's when I just said, magic is real, because I've always been a logical, skeptical person. And now I have enough evidence to know that there is this whole other world so much farther than the eye can see. And that just even being aware that there's so much more than this creates a sense of magic. And realize, like you said, when I'm having a hard time now, I don't crumble to the ground or try to escape from it. I lean into, oh, wait, I have a spirit team. Help, help.
Yes.
What do I
Yeah.
do? And they come through. It doesn't mean they're going to work everything out perfectly so that your life is just easy. But it's like later you start to see, oh, now I know why that happened. It was leading me here and to here. Like you said, the breadcrumbs. It's leading me to follow these breadcrumbs, which ended me up here. And that's why I had to go through all of that to get to this learning moment and to find the peace that I was searching for the whole time.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, I love the name of your podcast, that Magic's Real, because I didn't know that. Like it's really cool that, like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is real. And you know what? I never get tired of it. I
Me neither.
always ask for more, because
Hold
this
on.
does.
Emergency alert. Just there was a somebody, it's okay, missing and endangered. Go on. Go on.
I do not miss all those alerts when I was in LA,
Yes.
during the fire.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you for
Um,
that.
yeah, so everything that you were saying is so true. And I think that's what's hard. Literally my heart goes out for people that are like in the middle of
Yeah.
all this, because when you're in the middle of it, you don't understand. I didn't understand. I remember on the big end, I'm like, I don't understand. I was in the flow. I could make all this
Mhm.
money. Everything came like it was easy and fun. And now nothing. Nothing. Like everything that could go wrong is. And I didn't understand it. And so one thing to add to what you're saying, when you said about, spiritual awakening doesn't make your life easier. No, in a lot of times it actually makes it harder.
Yeah.
In fact, because um, my life was a lot easier when I was asleep and making this money
Hmm.
and stuff. I
Yeah.
wasn't happy necessarily, but things were flowing. And so it's a challenge. But like you're saying, knowing that we're not alone, and that we have help, but we have to ask. That was the other thing that I learned, is like, we have to ask, because we all have free will. And if we just say, please help me see it differently, send me, I'm feeling empty. Um, send me some inspiration, which is what, for me, I get that all the time if I ask, because I'll go through these periods where it's like, what am I doing? And the minute I think it's me, I start coming like down and I
Yeah.
start doubting. But so I would literally ask, send me a sign, and I get amazing signs. And that's where it makes it magical if we just ask and
Hmm.
trust, trust that, for your, listeners that are, um, wondering about this. It's like, trust that it's real because it's that ego that wants to second guess yourself. And
Yeah.
trust me, I had it was funny. So my mom, she's done all these amazing things, right? I have seen her. She's grabbed my arm. I've heard her. I've had all, what do you call those? All the clairs or whatever with her
Yeah.
and the other people. And yet sometimes a few days later, something amazing could happen. Now I'm not so much that way. But for a long time, it was like I'd have this amazing experience that is no way it's like just a synchronicity. It was the other side helping. And and then I would doubt it. And
Hmm.
I remember one day I was with my mom, or I was traveling around the island, and I was doubting something that she had done. I don't remember what it was, but it was really cool, whatever it was. And it was a couple of days later, and she actually joked, because that's the other thing, as you know, like they're funny from the other
Yeah.
side. And they're also not like angels, meaning if they cussed in life, they may cuss
Hmm.
from the other side, because my mom's cussed a few times, which blew my mind. But so when in this instance, when I was questioning something, my mom says from the other side, she's like, so what do you need? A burning bush? Remember in Moses when the burning
Yes,
bush? And it was just so funny because, yeah, I
I
do.
do.
I
I
need
want to
physical things.
Yes. And that's why I tattooed trust on my wrist to remind myself in mediumship that you're some people will see, like you had the opportunity to see with you saw your mom, right? At certain
Yeah.
points. I don't see, I feel. There
Okay.
is in my new house in Laurel Canyon, there is a spirit here. It's the first time I've ever seen a spirit, although I all I see is a shadow out of the corner of my eye. And I asked the landlord about it. I said, uh, there's I I feel spirit, especially in certain parts of my house. In fact, to the point where I was feeling it the other day walking down my hallway, and my roommate said, "Oh, do you know that the guy who came to glaze the tub yesterday, young man, said." Is there a spirit in here? Because I feel like I'm being watched, and it was right where I stand, and every time I walk down my little hallway, I feel it. And so I said there is someone, and I keep hearing the name Byron. So I asked the landlord, she's like, "I don't know. Byron could be somebody from before, but I've heard it so many times that I know there's a soul here." And she said, "But," I said, "But then I'm seeing this thing." And she said, "Oh, you met our kitchen elf," because she raised her kids here. And she said, "We'd always see it out of the corner of our eye. It's a little shadow, and we called it the kitchen elf because we didn't have another name for it, but it's right by the kitchen door where the dining room is." I'm like, "That's exactly where I was standing, talking to my roommate, looked up, I kept turning my head, and she's like, "What is it?" I'm like, "There's a shadow, like, out of the corner of my eye," and am I hallucinating, or is that really happening? So that's the only kind of thing I see. The rest of spirit communication is feeling and trusting the feeling, because sometimes it'll come as spirit tingles where I can tell you when there's a spirit there. I feel it. It feels like ASMR. It's a feeling of tingling on my scalp. And
Yeah.
the last week I think it's because I'm in this house. It's been nonstop, and I could tell them to stop, but I like it. So I like knowing when there's someone there. It's not scary to me. It feels nice. And I feel it, but sometimes trusting the message, because I keep saying, "Well, what do you want? Like, why are you what are you trying to communicate?" And I'm not really getting much from them other than, "We're just letting you know we're here," kind of thing. And it feels very loving. But a lot of times with the message, I just got chills again. With the message, I'll kind of have to just you just have to trust it. I mean, there's no other way to do mediumship than it's all trust. It's not technique. It's literally just sit, trust, be, exist, relax, listen. And it's so subtle. And so it might be, it could be anything. Like it could be the smallest little glimpse of a shimmer of an idea. And you say it out loud and the other person says, that resonates with me. That's really interesting. Or a name comes through and you just kind of have to not be afraid of being wrong. And just, if you feel it, people say, well, how do I know it's a sign from my loved one? I'm like, because you just know. You just know. Sometimes you'll see the number, a repeating number. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's just 333 right now. But when you see 333 and you recognize it and it's the timing of it and you get a chill, or maybe you just have a knowing that that's my grandma, or that's who's the first person you think of.
Yeah.
And so that's what I teach too, is I feel a spirit and I say, all right, who is it? First name that comes, Byron. And I was like, I don't know anyone named Byron. So I don't think I made that up. Still researching that. It's not someone who lived here, I don't think, but it's that just knowing that I don't know how I know. I just know it. I know it's a Byron. I know that. And
Yeah.
how do you know it's your grandma? Because you felt something, you saw something, and you said, who's here? And you heard grandma. It's literally that easy.
Yeah. It's weird that, so I get those spiritual tingles too,
You do too.
which
I
I
love
did.
hearing that.
I didn't understand at first, because at first it felt like my mom was trying to get inside me, is what it felt like.
Yeah. I always feel it
And
on one side too. Always on
yeah,
my right side. Do you? Or do you feel it everywhere?
well, no, the spiritual tingles I will feel everywhere now.
Yeah.
And like I said, at first felt like she was trying to get in me.
Yeah.
And it also wore me out at first, which was kind of interesting. I
Yeah.
realized, like that part, that, like, I don't know if it's because, like pineal gland, if it's a
Hmm.
muscle or whatever, but it would wear me out. I would get exhausted. And I actually had to tell her to tone it down
Yeah.
at first, because she was so strong. And I think my mom has always been like, she gets real excited. And
Yeah.
so she got all excited because I could hear her and then see her. And so, yeah, she's come every way. And in fact, about a month or so after I got out of the hospital, it's because, so when I was in the hospital, everything shut down today. I had no immune system. I had no white blood cells. I had no red blood cells. I had this thing called neutropenia or whatever, where everyone had to wear masks and I couldn't have flowers and stuff because I was susceptible to everything. So I had like almost no numbers. I was like, it was a huge miracle. But so about a month after the hospital, I went to this, I'd taken a blood test. I went to the doctor to go through the results. And I was all excited because, my numbers were coming back a little bit. They were still like a dead person, but they were better than they were.
Yeah.
And so I went home and I was excited. I texted my sisters and I'm like, okay, my numbers are finally going up just a little bit. And I guess because I'd been around all these people, I don't know what, all of a sudden I started feeling really sick. And like I was dropping fast. And I always know when I'm like crashing. And so I was crashing and I got scared. I got really scared because I'm like, and this is how it was, because remember, I didn't know if I was going to live. They didn't know if I was going to live. So it's a day at a time. I was like, I really do want to live. And, and I had a choice. I could have gone, but I like begged. I really wanted to stay. So anyway, all of a sudden I'm crashing and I got scared and I heard my mother. She yelled. She literally said, and it was like in a commanding voice, he's had enough.
Oh, wow.
And it blew my mind because I remember thinking, what are they doing up there? Like, are they just like messing with me? Is this like
Yeah.
fun? And literally that's what I was thinking. Like, the Great Gods, if you've seen any of those, like Jason and the Argonauts or those old shows, you'll see the great gods looking down on us, doing stuff, having fun with us. And that's what it felt like. And I still don't know the answer.
Hmm.
But after she yelled that he's had enough, within an hour and a half, the fever, everything went away and I felt fine.
Wow.
And so that's the other thing that they can do from the other side is they do have the ability to heal. I've had these experiences because I still have my abdominal hernia came back and I need to have another surgery. And sometimes it's like started to kink and our friend Pam, there
Yeah.
was this one time I was at Target and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm dying. Like I could feel it. And I called Pam. I'm like, I can barely move. Like, come to Target and get me, please.
Yeah.
And so she came and got me and took me home. And she was doing some Reiki and stuff. And all of a sudden, we see her husband, Alan, and my mom. And my mom's up there kind of like directing traffic, literally
Yeah.
sending other angels and they're doing like these different healing things. And I was took an hour and a half or so, and it literally I could feel my hernia like unkinky, like almost like
Wow.
untwisty. And I didn't have to go to the hospital. It was like, and there's when I got COVID the first time that happened too, where um somebody had, I was staying away from everyone, but I kept thinking to myself, it's like, okay, I didn't just come through this NDE to like get COVID and die. Like,
Yeah.
so I really wasn't afraid of COVID, and I didn't think I'd catch it, but I did. Somebody came to my house and brought it, and so what was weird is I didn't know for sure that I had it, but I was pretty sure because they tested positive, and I literally felt, which I now call it a celestial scrubbing, because I could feel them working on me. And it's those tingles, but it
Yeah.
was also like this light, like this shower of golden light. And so what was really interesting is I went and I got the test and it said negative, but I still knew. So I kept testing negative actually. And at some point I went and got the blood test, which showed the antibodies. But I have literally felt healing from the other side.
Yeah.
Now, and I think it doesn't mean though that, at least in my experience, like I've had miracles but having health issues has been my path to awakening. So like it's not like I'm just going to be completely healed. You know what I
Of
mean?
course.
And I know that, but so I don't want people to think that, but they can, and if that's divine will, I believe you can be totally healed. But I think for some of us, especially me, it seems like that's one of the things that keeps me um connected and humble, is just that reminder, which I forgot to tell you. So the nurse in the
Oh, yeah.
hospital.
Oh, it's so weird. Okay. I was literally just thinking I didn't know I was thinking about the nurse you were talking about, but the last few the last 20 minutes I'm running this by you, I just kept hearing, "My name's Elizabeth, they call me Libby," but then I saw nurse. And so I just wondered if any of that meant anything to you, but it might also be that we're coming back to the nurse. So just keep that in your mind.
My mom's name is Elizabeth.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I kept feeling like I'm going to say this on air because I know, because I hear Elizabeth, but did people call her Libby?
No, they Liz or Betty.
I just kept hearing Libby, but then it was something like Abigail, but then she was like, it's Elizabeth. So anyway, I just kept hearing Elizabeth, Elizabeth, but somebody might have called her Libby because I was seeing the B in the middle and I could have just gotten the name wrong. Um,
Well, you
yeah,
might have seen Betty
it
because
might have been Betty.
and she didn't like that. Like, so she likes Elizabeth,
Yeah.
but my dad would call her Betty. She didn't like it.
That makes sense because
So,
I was hearing something about my name's Elizabeth, but there's this nickname that has a strong B in the middle of it. That was what I was hearing. But also then I was seeing something about a nurse. So that might have been a reminder to go back to the nurse. I just wanted to run that by you. So share your nurse story.
yeah. And so what's cool, by the way, is you've probably seen this saying. There's a meme with people doing a seance,
Yeah.
and it's like somebody's here. I don't even remember and her name is Elizabeth, and I don't remember. Oh, and it was something about. Oh, Zoom is the like new seance or something like that. And it was funny because I've had hundreds of people send me that meme because they know that my
Oh,
mother's
so funny.
Elizabeth.
Like I've been hearing Elizabeth for like 20 minutes, but I just was going to
Yeah,
wait to ask you, but I was like, do I say it on air? And if I'm wrong, I'll just delete it. But I was like, no, I know it's Elizabeth. I'm like, because I'm feeling
yeah.
Elizabeth here. So, okay, so your mom's here, obviously, because we're talking about
She's always,
she's
yeah, but
always with
she's
you.
always. And I, in fact, I had this other guy that was like the one that I told you about, at that sharing group. I had this other guy who some friends of mine, they kept wanting me to meet this guy who had been to SRF, which is Self-Realization Fellowship,
Oh yeah.
Yogananda. And he also did this, it's called Mahakari, and it's this light healing, kind of like Reiki, but it's light. And he lived here. And these friends kept wanting me to meet this guy. So finally, I was like, okay, let's go meet. And we went to this coffee place by me. And interestingly enough, I'd had like this day around some dark energy people, which I'm understanding more, but I didn't understand it then because I literally didn't know about a lot of this stuff. So anyway, so this guy, we go to this coffee place and these three women friends of mine and this guy. And so we connected, and all of a sudden it's like they kind of fade away. And this guy is channeling. And he's like, and so he starts out with something about your mom, and your mom's always here. She's always with you. And then all of a sudden he's like, she's really, literally always with you.
Literally always with you. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And I kept seeing too, just and I will go to the nurse story, I haven't forgotten, but I just kept seeing that movie Ice Castles, like ice skating movie. Does that mean anything to you?
Oh yeah, she liked that movie. Was that was wait, was that the one with Robbie Benson? And
I haven't, yes, yes.
it's like an old movie.
It's an old
Yeah.
movie from the 70s. I think the
It's
70s.
yeah, I don't remember who else. It's funny that you say that because I haven't thought about that
I
since
haven't,
then, but I watched it with her. And
yeah,
she
there
and
she just said to say that and I was like, "All right, I'm just going to say it." And there's something too about a dressing room in a store. Did you get lost in a dressing or something about like something about a store and being in a dressing room and I don't know what that means. If do you?
um
It's like I'm seeing the curtain of the dressing room and it's like a red curtain over a dressing room, but it's in a store.
so when I was a kid, she'd take me shopping,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna have to think about that, but like I
Yeah.
think there's a memory there. So
I
like
think there's a
there's
memory about like losing you in the dressing room or something, hiding in the dressing room. So if it comes up, let me know. But there was
you know
just,
what? She lost me a lot because remember she
she was not
she
a well woman. Yeah. Okay.
she took me to the barber salon once. I was like 6, something like that. So the barber shop. Okay, she dropped me
Yeah.
off in the morning. She didn't come back until like
Oh,
that night. It was dark,
oh,
and
wow.
here's a 6-year-old kid calling my house. Nobody answers, and I don't know where my dad was. I don't know where she was. I remembered, she finally came, and it was dark, and the barber shop, like he was staying there with just me. So there was a lot of stuff that I'm still dealing with. That some of it I don't even remember, but as you just said, that dressing room, like I'm having glimmers
There's
of
something about
yeah.
losing you in a dressing room or like you are hide like you can't be found. So maybe it'll come to you later. But before we go, tell the nurse story. And then I just wanted to validate that that was her because she's coming to me pretty strongly now, which is really fun. So I just wanted to kind of run it by you. Did she have blue eyes too? I don't know why she's showing me blue eyes.
They
That's
well, they were kind of like greenish.
okay. I don't know why blue eyes are important, but she's showing me blue eyes.
Well, when I'm the healthiest, my eyes are more blue.
Oh
So
yeah.
it might have to do that because my eyes change colors actually,
Okay.
depending on how I'm feeling. So they
Yeah.
can go from blue to green, and then one
Yeah.
that's more green because they're actually two different color eyes.
Oh,
And
cool.
which a lot of people don't have, and I don't know if you know what that means, but
Mm-mm.
in Native American and shamanism, it means one foot in both worlds.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. That's wild. That makes a lot of sense. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
And I didn't know that. And And there's another thing, back in pagan times that has to do with witches that I don't even remember what that was, but yeah, there are metaphysical meanings to two different color
Yeah.
eyes. And but yeah, so there's a lot of, it's funny that you're saying that with my mom because there's a lot of things that she still feels guilty of.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that many times they cross over and they want our forgiveness.
Yeah.
Like they know what they did. And so like in her case, I've completely forgiven and it's not like I had to forgive because once I saw the 360-degree view of why she was the way she was, it was like I completely understood. But the thing is and she knows that, and this is what's kind of weird. Um, so even though I don't hold, any bad feelings, I'm so grateful to her. But the things that happened when she was alive still have affected me in this life. So I still have trauma and wounds that I'm working through. And so it's weird for me that when I talk about that stuff, it's like it used to feel like I was talking behind her back, even though I'm not really,
Yeah.
because she knows. But so now what's interesting is she knows that I'm still living with that, which is part of the reason she's still here. So it's interesting because she still wants, she still has guilt and she still wants that forgiveness. Like she still feels the pain of what she did. And so that's why this thing that you're about the
Yeah.
dressing room, like there's things that she
It was
remembers.
something about leaving you in a store or losing, like left you in the dressing room or something. And that's like,
Yeah.
and then also what she just gave me the feeling of too is that she doesn't necessarily need your forgiveness for her, but for you. She wants to help you heal your own heart by being able to forgive.
Yes.
She's like, it's not about me. It's really for you. I want you to live in peace because you didn't deserve that. And she's like, my issues are affecting you today, and she loves you and doesn't want to see her child suffering. And so she's trying to help. I'm getting chills. She's trying to help you find that forgiveness, which you already know, but she just wanted to reiterate that because I'm getting major chills as I'm saying that. Like, it's not because I need the validation anymore, because in the spirit world I don't need that. It's all good. It's just that I
Yeah.
want you to find peace in your heart, which you've been on the path of doing, I know. And she appreciates your forgiveness and understanding and compassion as well so much. Like, thank you for being such a kind person and for forgiving me. And also, I really want to not just say I'm sorry, but make amends, make it right. It's like, not, it isn't sorry. It's, I want you to be well. And so I'll do anything I can from the other side to support you in your healing because if I had known what I know now, I would never have behaved the way that I did, but I wasn't in my right mind. She just wasn't, she didn't have the tools. She didn't have the
Yes,
understanding, the
exactly.
awareness. And she also just showed me too, like the Velveteen Rabbit, or like a stuffed rabbit or something. Did you have that as a kid, or was it the Velveteen Rabbit?
It was a little white rabbit.
Yeah.
Was it called the Velveteen Rabbit?
Well, she showed me a stuffed rabbit, and then she was showing me the book, The Velveteen Rabbit, but it was something you would have carried as a
Yes,
little kid. It was
yes.
something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a photo of me as a little kid. I'll have to
She
have my
showed
sister.
she showed me you holding a little droopy rabbit, like it's kind of a dangly looking stuffed animal, and it's almost like, I don't know, just a memory, but it's like you holding a little stuffed rabbit is like a sweet memory that she has of when you were little, where there was this, I don't know, it's feeling like this sense of love that she wishes she had realized how precious you were at that time, but she didn't have the capability of really saying, you are my little sweetheart, like, just, how much I really, really, really love you, because she was blocked from feeling to protect herself. And so it was like now she can look at those memories in her space of energy and feel that love for that little boy, that like sweet little baby that just holding the little bunny, and just to see the innocence and to have all the blocks to love there. It just like she just wants, like, remembers you, and you're still that little boy holding a little stuffed rabbit is kind of like what she showed me, which is really sweet.
And so yeah, I was getting the spiritual chills the whole
Yeah,
time you
just
were
me
saying
too.
that.
Yeah. There's something about
Yeah.
and also there's something about the card game Uno, which I don't know if you'll remember.
Yes. We played Uno all the time. We'd go to Lake Powell in southern Utah on our boats,
Okay.
and we would sit there and play Uno on the boats.
That was just,
And
she showed me that's so clear. That's wild.
this is really cool because you're reminding me of things that I forgot about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's everything that you're saying is spot on. And it's really cool. I didn't know we were going to be doing this
I
way
know I
back.
didn't, it's just that
It's
I heard her. She's very loud and she's very
yes.
strong, but it's not because she's trying to steal the spotlight. It's because she want the other thing that she just gave me a big chill about this too, is that she also, just to add to the fact that we're doing this publicly and we're sharing this publicly, is she, I'm getting such huge chills, is that she is like, in her amends, is like, I'm willing to put my dirty laundry out there to help him heal, to admit to what I did in, and I have no fear of judgment. It's like, I am willing to admit it out loud, and I'll tell everyone, kind of like, I am
Yes.
not a, like, it doesn't matter to me. I just want him to have his truth heard, and like really acknowledging that. And so that's why she's sort of busting in a public forum where it's like, I did those things. I did. And I now understand they were wrong. And I also didn't have the knowledge I have now. And now I just want to make up for it the best I can. And that's even just acknowledging it. And also remembering, like, we did have good times together. And you know that. And that you say it all the time. Like, I do love my mom. And it was traumatic. And there are also some really sweet memories. So it can be two things. It can be trauma and it can also be great love.
Yes. Yes, both things can be true. And that's what's really interesting. And I absolutely love this that she's coming to you because what's so cool is she does do that a
Yeah.
lot, but I you're really hearing her, which I love
Yeah.
because
She's a good communicator.
yeah. She's strong.
Yeah.
As you know, she's like, I mean, she's powerful.
Yeah.
And she the version on the other side that she's showing you is it's so amazing because it's so different than who she was
Right.
when she was um alive. And yeah, I mean, she is smart and powerful.
It's her pure essence. It's not the person she was in the body that was traumatized, mentally ill, affected by life experiences. That's not who we really are. The person who hurts other people is a person who's been hurt. So hurt people hurt
Yes.
people. It's not an excuse,
Right.
but it's an understanding. It helps us explain, why would she do that? It's because she was so shut down herself and just in her own head at the time that she could not love in a healthy way because of her own stuff. But she isn't that person. Her soul is a beautiful soul, and we all are. That's the thing. I think we all are. I don't think we're evil. People that do
Right.
evil things, I don't personally think that it's because they're evil. It's because
Right.
they're indoctrinated, mentally ill, very traumatized people.
Yes. And that's what's really interesting about my mom is I know that. You know that because you
Yeah.
connected with her. But there are some people in my family that still don't know that.
Yeah.
And they still see her the way she was, which I
Right.
didn't realize that because I've had all this healing, but I've recently found out that there are some people in my family that see her as evil, literally.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want to mention names, but
Yeah.
which I won't, but like somebody in my family is like, no, she can't come in my house.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. And it's like, but it was interesting. I'm like, afterwards, I'm like, I understand. Because if I hadn't seen the full picture of her, I might still be in the same way. But there was something that you said that I forgot was a big mantra of mine. So you said something about her saying, if she loved me, how could she do that?
Yeah.
That was a huge, that was my mantra almost. If you say you love me, how could you do these things? And that really was the thing that probably the biggest thing that really caused me a large amount of trauma was that because I didn't understand in my family, people could say, I love you, and then chase you around the house with a knife and try to kill you or sue you. I've been sued by both my parents. And
Oh,
yeah, right. And so, but it's amazing that you're seeing what I see. And what's really cool is it's anybody usually that that is a medium is able to connect with her, but she's come through the strongest to you,
oh, that's
literally.
great. I think it's because,
Yeah.
yeah, I do have compassion for people because I know that they wouldn't be acting that way if they weren't in a lot of pain. And it doesn't mean that it's okay what they did. It doesn't mean that it's excusable, but it's an explanation for why they behave because it's so hard to
Right.
wrap our heads
And
around.
as you know, she knows that. And so that's what's really interesting for me is I know why she did it. I don't have ill will. I love her. I love her around.
Yeah.
I mean, she is my biggest protector. She's always around.
Yeah.
And she's literally does amazing things and is guiding me. And but there's still this trauma that I'm dealing with.
The trauma is stays in your cells. That's your nervous
Yes.
system still needing to be rewired and to form new neural pathways so that the trauma response isn't always people are going to leave me, people are going to abandon me, and then we repeat those patterns. And that's a whole other podcast I could do about attachment theory and why people have it the way that they do, because when you associate love with not safe or betrayal, then you tend to have that fear and then it perpetuates itself. But I could go on all day, but let me just have you tell the nurse story real quick because you said something like, want to get back to
Yeah.
it, and then I could
And we do need to do that at some point, that all that stuff, because I do want to talk about that
let's
a
do it.
lot
We're gonna do a
more.
follow up.
Yeah, because when I saw that you were talking more about trauma, I think that is so important.
Let's do it
And
because it's a
I
great
didn't even
topic.
know it was real until after my ND. I literally thought PTSD was a thing that guys in the military, like
Well,
that's how clueless I was
no,
until I realized when I saw that lung clinic, the doctor, I had to go back to see him like a month or two afterwards, and I looked him up on the hospital website. And when I saw his face, it literally took me back. I couldn't see him for 3 months
yeah,
because I had so much PTSD from seeing that look in his eyes. I mean, he was reflecting back to me the fear and the horror that I was feeling. And so like also when I was going through the x-ray areas and stuff in the hospital, when I had to go back, I couldn't believe my whole body, like I almost couldn't even walk. I was in so much PTSD. So I didn't learn, I didn't know. So
yeah,
I've learned a lot. So it'd be fun to talk about that. But I have to, so with my mom, and then we'll go to the other thing. So the thing about my mom that is so cool. So she's like, I've got this huge playlist, and she, that's one of the easiest ways is songs, but she does all this other, I mean, huge, amazing stuff. But I was at the doctor's, and this was like about 6 months ago, and I was sitting outside the doctor waiting for Uber, and I was just sitting there, and it's like, I love my life. I have a beautiful life here in Hawaii. I'm blessed, but this is not the life that I had planned. The life that I had planned had all this money, I had this estate, all these other houses, all this stuff. And it's not like I missed that, but it's like, well, sometimes I do actually. My house in Big Bear, it was amazing. That's
yeah.
like,
I love Big
I
Bear.
love the mountains. Yeah. And it was really cool. And it was me too. So it was like, it was like all like antique shops and stuff. So it was like me, things that I found, and it was the perfect mountain house. And what was interesting is I also realized after is that I was trying to recreate the life that I had in Utah, like because all of our Christmases were dysfunctional in Utah. So I was trying to recreate the perfect Christmas in my house in Big Bear, which of course didn't happen. But and now I understand why. But anyway, so I was sitting outside the doctor waiting for Uber, and just like I was just sitting there in the breeze and it felt really good. But for a minute, I thought about my old life and how different this life is. And all of a sudden, I could feel her. And that's the kind of moment where, like what you were saying, where, like you're saying, like that she wants me to release that, like, and
Mhm.
let go of that, and forgive myself.
Yes.
And but also she sees the pain that her actions then, and my dad's actions that then led to me making all these other choices in my life. And so anyway, I got in the car, the Uber, and all of a sudden I heard this song, and it's like I knew it was from her, and it was Hoopstank, The Reason. And I knew it was from her, but for whatever reason I dismissed it. So then I was watching a movie, comes up again. It was a series or a movie, same thing. And what I've learned is that when I'm supposed to get a message, it's going to keep coming
Yep.
until I listen. And now I just, like I listen. And so anyway, that song, it was, I don't, if you know that song, it's literally all about, I'm so sorry I hurt you. And all about that, who I am now is different. And the reason that I
Um,
have for being a better person is you. I'm paraphrasing.
yeah.
And so yeah, she I didn't know that they, like in her case, how much they can do from the other side, and how important, as you know, as you're seeing, that it is for them to help us from the other side. In this case, she's truly being the mother she couldn't be when she was alive. But beyond that, I mean, she does miracles. She
Yeah.
literally provides miracles for me, sends me to proper doctors and stuff like that. And I'll always know when she was behind it. And in fact, I got to tell you, so I went to this neurology place maybe 2 years, a year or two after, and because I had neuropathy, and but I didn't know for sure. And so I went to this neurology place, and I'd never been there before. It's in this old hospital that I didn't know anything about. All I knew is that when I got to this hospital, there are spirits everywhere. This place is just swarming. And my mom was really, really strong. So when I was a kid, because I had all these health issues, she would go to the hospital or the doctors with me, and of course the hospital. But I also need to add, because remember how you said she's not marching in?
Yeah.
The reason that you heard that is because as a kid, when I would go to the doctor, she would make it about her.
Right.
So we'd go to the doctor, and they're seeing me for my asthma or whatever. I couldn't breathe. And she'd start making it about her. And then the doctor or the nurse would have to say, Elizabeth, you had your doctor's appointment. We're here for Shaun. And so that's why you got that message, by the way,
Oh,
which,
okay, cool. All right.
yeah, was very cool, because she did. She made everything about her.
Yeah.
And so I was like in the background, which is of course why she would lose me in stores and
Right.
forget
Yeah.
about me at the barber. But anyway, so because she went with me to the doctors, and this happened quite a bit in the beginning, where she literally would go with me to the doctor. Because I'm sitting there going to these doctors alone, kind of scared. I don't know what a neural, when they do that thing where they stick the needles in you and shock you, which I can't remember what it's called, but I'd never had that before. And and so I'm like a little bit scared and nervous and what's going on, but she's there with me. She's like this kid, like when I was a kid, like she wanted to help me fill out the forms in spirit, like literally I could feel her. And I'm texting my sisters, and I'm like, mom is literally acting like when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Except now she's like, back then it was about her. Now it's about me.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool. And what was also wild is I didn't know this, but so I could connect with dead people when I was a kid. I just didn't trust it. And one of the things was that I would smell carnations.
Mhm. Is that
I
your
don't know
grandma?
why.
No.
No, but I'll tell you a story about my grandma. It's just in general. If it was spirits, I would smell carnations. And so at that place, that's what I would smell. So I went, you know, she was all excited, helped me, you know, sitting there as I'm filling out the things. I did my thing, you know, where they shocked me and stick the needles. And then later, I went in the main part of this old hospital, which it turns out it's a hospice. Because the minute I went in there, I was just like, psh. And it's like, this is why I felt all these spirits. And this is also why she was so strong. Because I've noticed there's certain places that she's stronger, like on that mountaintop. And so we call them portals here, which I mean, and so my understanding with her is that like a portal is a place where it's easier for them to kind of like meet us halfway, right? So they can
Yeah.
come down and we can come up in vibrations and so that place was one of those. But okay, so back to the nurse. So
Yeah.
the nurse, so I didn't know. I knew that I'm a Spanish nun 400 or 500 years
Wait,
ago.
did you tell me that? Because I was just about to ask what your mom's connection to nuns was. Did you say that before? Because I was seeing a lot of nuns when I was connecting with your mom, and I was about to ask, what's her connection with nuns?
I will tell you, right now you're connecting with somebody else. You're actually
Okay.
connecting with a saint.
Okay. So
And that's
because I
so
kept seeing nuns, and I was just waiting for you to finish because I was going to ask about the nuns, and then you said it. So I'm like, okay, well, now
yeah.
continue with your story.
Yeah. So okay. So remember the lady, I go back in time, she's a nun. I'm in this cathedral overlooking this countryside in Spain. I've never been to Spain. I um as you know, for a long time, I didn't tell my story publicly. I had that protection, and Trisha, I promised her I would tell her first, right? And so when I finally got ready to do the interview with Trisha Barker, um, I'm like, I haven't. I mean, there's so much of my NDE that I haven't processed. Even now, there's a lot of messages that I have that are like too big for
Yeah.
me to even understand right now. And I realize they're slowly as my brain and whatever. Because if we really saw the whole
Oh,
truth of our we'd explode. We can't handle
I
it.
always say that our brains would explode. Our minds would
Yeah.
explode.
Yeah. And so there's certain things that I experience that even when I think about them now, my head feels like it's going to explode.
Right.
And so they're starting to come slowly, slowly as I can understand it better. But so anyway, so with Trisha, I'm like, I haven't really looked into why. Oh, got to back up. After the NDE and doing the spiritual book studies, I had this renewed interest in, I wanted to learn metaphysical Bible passages because I kept getting all these different messages about in those spiritual book studies about what things meant originally versus what people think they mean now. And so, for example, like the sins of the father, what I got is all that means is what you don't kill in this lifetime, it gets transferred to the next generation and the next generation. And I saw that with my mom because stuff from her mother got transferred to her, to my sister, and then my sister's daughter. And so to me, that's what the sins of the father really just meant. It's just, stuff we don't heal here gets carried on. And we want to heal these things. And we can actually heal the generational stuff, right? From the way from back, we can actually do. And so I wanted to learn these different meanings because I was getting the guidance, but I didn't trust myself. So as I was doing this metaphysical Bible study, all of a sudden, somebody mentioned Saint Teresa of Avila. And the minute they said that, I like it clicked. And I'm like, that's who it was. And I went and I looked. Sure enough, I went and looked up Saint Teresa of Avila, and it's like, that's her. And I knew it was her, but I still didn't know why. Okay, so now I just knew, okay, that's who I saw that I was with. I don't know why. I was born Mormon. I don't know anything about the Catholic Church. I don't know anything about saints. So then a year later or whatever, and the thing that I've always known is that when, or I shouldn't say always, since my NDE, when the time is right, I will know what I need to know. Like, and so there's certain things I know, like don't ask.
Yeah.
But just know that in due time, when I need to know, I'll know, like past lives.
Mm-hmm.
After my NDE, I believed in reincarnation, but I didn't know at that time really about my past life. I just knew that when the time was right, I would know. So anyway, I was getting ready to do this thing with Trisha. And so I like Googled St. Teresa of Avila. And I went and looked, and the basilica that she lived in, the Basilica de Torres, the view from that place in Spain is the same countryside that I saw in the hospital. And so I saw, so I was going back in time in that experience with her. And what I've later learned, so that just blew me away when I saw the countryside, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been there. And so what I later learned is her and I lived together back then, and we have a relationship. And I know some of my past life. I don't want to like say it yet, but she has come to me, and much of her awakening was real. She was in a coma, and that, of course, was most likely an NDE, but they didn't know that then. So
Right.
she has become well, she always was. I just didn't know it. Another one of my guides that is always there. And I've been led now. Somebody had reached out to me like a year after that, because I knew it's like, okay, when it's time, I'll know more. So somebody said they wanted me to go to this book study. And without even knowing what the book study was, I said, yeah, I'll do it. I just knew I was supposed to do it. Ends up being this book called Enter the Castle that St. Teresa of Avila had written. And it's all about these awakening exercises. And then Carolyn Miss, who is actually going to be a speaker at the next IANS conference, she made like an easier version of Entering the Castle than the one Teresa wrote. So when I went to that book study, I could feel her connecting with me and talking through me, even to the group.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I've learned that I've had this past life with her, and that's what I was seeing. And it seems like we had some sort of an agreement that she would be with me. And so what's really cool is then I was getting ready to, I was going to do an interview with a friend of mine, Eric. I think you've met Eric. Eric, he lives in Scottsdale. Eric Taylor.
Oh,
Do you remember him?
I don't off the top of my head.
Black guy with dreads.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he was there at the Phoenix conference, and he was in the healing group. He's a great guy. And so he was one of my speakers, and I was going to do his podcast. So anyway, the day that I was going to do his podcast, I just wasn't feeling it that day. And I'm like, trying to meditate and everything. And I'm just like, and then this small part of me, that part that is still that reluctant messenger, like I don't have anything to say. Why am I even doing this? And that part was being loud. And so I'm doing meditation and everything. It's like, I'm just not feeling it. So I set up my computer and everything and getting ready to do this podcast. And all of a sudden, I'm like in the kitchen and I hear a woman's voice coming through my computer. And I did not turn on YouTube. Okay, it came on, and I'm going to tell you what it said. So, so this woman's voice is saying, if only someone would invite me to make a detailed list of all the things I have done wrong in my life. Instead, I've been asked to freely describe my spiritual practice and to record all the blessings my Lord has showered on me. I'd be so much more comfortable disclosing all my imperfections. And I looked at who was saying that, and and it was the autobiography of Saint Teresa of Avila. And I'd never looked up the autobiography. I hadn't read it. And it was so cool because I'm like with Eric, I'm like, I wasn't feeling it up until I heard her. And I'm like, but she's with us. So, and so, yeah, so she's kind of like, somebody that's always been there, but I'm just now realizing.
Right. That makes sense. So that's what I was picking up on because I kept seeing nuns and I was like
Yes.
about to say something, but I was just like, we'll get to
Yep.
that. Um, thank you. So, I mean, you and I will talk off podcast, but more. But this has been like such a, at least I think it's been a really great conversation and like and just one of my favorite conversations. And and thank you for sharing everything that you did with me, but also with my listeners, because I think it's just such a captive, like there's so much in here. And I'm just really appreciative that you've shown up to share your story and your insights. And there's so much more. I mean, there's so much more to be revealed. So we need to have more of these conversations. But I want to just thank you for being on Magic is Real today. And then, of course, we're friends off camera too. So we'll continue our conversation. But I just want to thank you so much for spending time with me and Magic is Real
Yeah,
today.
thank you. And yeah, I loved it. I'm so glad we actually waited
Me too.
because
Divine timing.
yeah, it was perfect. And and you connecting with my mom and Teresa, obviously, you seen all the
Yes, I
nuns.
just kept seeing like a row of nuns, and I'm like, well, who is that? But yeah, that's cool because and then the next time we talk, I know there's more because there's so much coming in, like so much stuff that I can feel from spirit, and they're just showing me like little clips of things. Like I saw Uno, it was just like the yellow,
Yes.
I saw the logo so clearly in my mind, and that's what everybody that's how spirit communicates. It's like just pay attention to what's going on in the back of your mind while you're interacting, and you'll start to notice little things popping up, and you can just kind of run them by people and say, just why am I seeing that? And then putting the pieces
Yeah.
together.
And so what's really cool about you, I have to say, so you weren't reading me because I didn't even
Remember,
remember
oh
about
yeah,
Uno. Like, I
that's a
mean,
good point.
yeah, I hadn't thought about that, like at all. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, when I think about my mom, there's lots of memories and even Lake Powell, but I have not thought about Uno. And so, yeah, so I'm just gonna say this like as a
yeah,
testimonial to you that you were not reading my energy, you weren't reading her energy. I mean, you were getting true messages,
that's
which
so cool.
is very cool. And then, of
It's
course,
magic.
it is.
It's
It
so cool.
is.
I know, it's like never ceases to amaze me. Thank you, Shaun Lether. And also, how can we, well, there's going to be links, but like, how can people get involved with Hawaiian Ions or become part of the group or whatever?
Yeah, hawaiianions.com. And also, you'll put a link to me, which eventually I'll have ShaunLether.com. I got to work on a new website. But yeah, so I mean, Hawaiian Nines is the easiest. They can find me on Facebook for sure. That's where all of our groups are, but also Instagram, Shaun Lether. And
Amazing.
I'm pretty easy to find if you look.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shaun. Lots of love to you, and we will speak soon.
Thank you so much. It's been
Thank
a
you so much.
pleasure.